Presenting the PR Maven podcast, hosted by Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven, targeted at business leaders who want to merge the best techniques of traditional networking with the best new platforms and technologies to engage your target audience, build your network, and grow your brand and business. The podcast is sponsored by Marshall Communications, Maine-based, globally connected. As we get ready for another great episode, remember, you can always connect with Nancy and other listeners on the PR Maven Nation group page on Facebook. Now, here's your host, Nancy Marshall.
Hello, PR Maven Nation. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, episode number 42, presented by Marshall Communications, creator of the Marshall Plan 65-Step Strategic Process. For those of you new to the show, I'm your host, Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I want to welcome you, and if you've been listening all along, I want to thank you and welcome you back. This podcast provides my unique perspective on the world of public relations and personal branding, including what I hope will be actionable takeaways. I want to emphasize the importance of enhancing your traditional relationship building with the power of today's new technology. Every week, the podcast features interviews with successful industry leaders, top executives, and media personalities from around the globe. This week's guest is no exception. I want to welcome John Francis, retired Vice President for Research, Conservation, and Exploration at National Geographic. And we're here today at the Augusta Civic Center at the Maine Governor's Conference on Tourism, where he will be presenting a speech. Welcome, John.
Well, thanks. Good to be here.
All right. So, John, tell us about your fascinating career and how you got into it in the first place.
I grew up with a forest in my backyard in Seattle and always loved nature. And it turned out that I was offered a job when I was an undergraduate in college that was to go and study seals up in Alaska. And so I was on this remote island trying to figure out how nature worked, and it got into my blood big time. And I went through my undergraduate studies, thought I was going to be a doctor, but I found that that love of nature was much more powerful. So I went on to graduate school and even did postdoctoral work studying seals as that was my livelihood, if you will. And one thing led to another. National Geographic did a film about my research, and I decided to jump ship and be a filmmaker and then later an administrator. So, I've been able to chase my dreams over the course of many years now, but a lot of it focused on the well-being of the planet and how people either affected for the good or sometimes for the bad. Obviously, I'd like to push things toward the former, and that's why I'm in sustainable tourism. It's one of the biggest levers to pull on the planet now when it comes to doing right things and helping people live in harmony with their natural setting.
Nice. So it just feels to me like you've been in alignment with your purpose. And I mean, nature kind of had this profound impact on you.
Yeah, and it's been a thread. It's funny how you never know where you're going to go exactly, but you have these guiding visions, and then you sort of tack with the winds, and you find the next opportunities. And I've been lucky to be able to do that. It's really, and even now, being here in Maine and being able to look at tourism and how it's done here and bring some of my experience to bear is, just a great way to pay it forward.
Well, why are you attending the Governor's Conference on Tourism, and what do you hope to achieve?
I was one of the leaders in the Maine Office of Tourism. Happened to be in Las Vegas when I was giving a talk to destination management, the destination management community, and I was talking about over-tourism and the challenges of that. And she said, hey, I'm working on some things that are very similar in Maine. And Maine actually looked pretty good from my perspective, evaluating all the people that were at the conference and so on. But she said, the people I work with would like to hear what you have to say. So why don't you come and do this with me? And I had some time and decided, I would put my energy there.
Cool. Well, we're glad that you did. What are some of the challenges in getting people to understand the role of tourism in shaping the future of the planet?
I think people nowadays are have heavy footprints on the planet, but they don't really know how important their day-to-day decisions are, from using plastic straws in a restaurant to choosing a local eatery that's owned and operated locally, that celebrates local food, rather than going to a comfortable, familiar chain restaurant. Each of these decisions are basically a way to vote for the future with your wallet. And people don't see their role as consumers as being so powerful, but in aggregate, it absolutely is. And so it's mostly an education problem. And people, what if you thought you could change the world with every dollar you place somewhere? If in fact you can, if you multiply your choice by the number of people who are making similar choices. So it's a matter of reframing oneself to be an active participant in the future of the places they visit.
So what are some of your success stories in shifting the way that people are seeing their impacts as global citizens? And do you have a success story you'd like to share with us today?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. One of the things that I was able to do with the Park Service, which you mentioned, was to devise a way to get people out in nature more. So it turns out there are these events that were just beginning to be known 15 years ago called BioBlitzes. And they were basically invitations for people to go out in nature and see what's there. We'd invite 2,000 or even 8,000 people to a national park, and they would go out with a couple hundred scientists who were experts in a variety of disciplines: owls, lichen, birds, and then they'd go and observe and count what was there in the park. So it was a way to, in a 24-hour period, usually, to just see what was there and to get people actively observing. And in some cases, these kids had never been to a park before. In Los Angeles, we had 2,000 students. And in one case where they were screaming thank you at their guides at the shore of Malibu Lagoon, we learned that half of them had never had their feet in the ocean. And this idea of people living in urban settings but not having been exposed because of their culture, family, access to resources, haven't been exposed to nature, is pathetic. And these BioBlitz efforts, we did one a year, were a great way to awaken local communities around cities. And in the end, we did a centennial BioBlitz that included over 280 national park units and 90,000 people in a grand celebration of nature across the park system in its entirety. So that whole 10-year march toward the centennial was one that I, was very proud to have initiated. And of course, having National Geographic stand behind it certainly helped to get the word out.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I've been involved lately with Sugarloaf Ski Resort, which is up in the northwestern part of our state, and getting local kids into skiing, because a lot of the kids who live just down the road, 15, 20 minutes down the road from the ski resort, have never even been there, been exposed to skiing. So there is a charitable project going on now to get the locals up on the mountain, and actually that could become the future workforce as well. So there's sort of a win-win there. But you mentioned that you grew up with a forest in your background, and probably your parents allowed you just to go out without supervision.
Well, we certainly did, and things are a little bit more timid nowadays,
Right.
With all the stories that can percolate, but really nature is an inviting and lovely place, not a threatening place, and it would be nice to be able to reframe that. In fact, some are saying it's the guiding force to our health as communities, that being in nature actually can be shown to be restorative and to be obviously great exercise, but also to give a sense of calm to people who are consumed by an urban setting.
Right, exactly. And there's the new trend of forest bathing.
Exactly.
Which is really just sort of walking in the forest and like what you said, being aware and conscious of what's out there.
Well, it's actually a good term because it raises eyebrows, and it even came up in the governor's conference, and people laugh, and at the same time, it gets people talking.
Right.
And what is behind that, really? And the fact is that, walking and hiking are extremely popular. and being in nature likewise, and it's for a reason. It does give you a sense of awe, wonder, peace that some people just don't have in their daily experience, but could if they were encouraged or if they actually could live closer to very well managed, protected areas.
Right, exactly. And even many urban areas, even in the center of New York City is Central Park. So
exactly.
If people seek out natural settings, I'm sure they can find them.
And there's a concept called rewilding that's very popular in Europe and is spreading, where you're actually restoring urban settings to a former wild nature. And then even within homes and in your own property, you can create natural habitats, and so that the fabric of the urban community can be more wild, and you can rebuild damaged or downtrodden areas of cities to become focal points for this kind of experience.
Right.
So this is a dialogue that's growing, and I think people are getting it more and more.
Absolutely. And of course, National Geographic, which is the brand that you've been working with, has had a huge impact on people's appreciation of worldwide nature. And what was it like to work at National Geographic, where you worked for more than 2 decades?
It was, in many ways, it was a dream come true, and I still have many ties there, but the part of it that was most profound for me is having a pre-existing, well-regarded brand, over 100 years old, with an audience of 700 million people a month, and then being able to energize dialogue within and supporting new champions that we could fund through the programs I supported and created. And those people then became the leaders and examples for new ways of thinking about the world and how it works and how we can be better citizens. So it was like landing in a spot where I could really have a voice and help push things a little bit in the right direction. So that, to me, was hugely satisfying. And the whole notion of being able to be an explorer in my work and to travel, I traveled an awful lot, getting to put cameras on the backs of seals and whales as a way to study what they did when they left the surface of the ocean. Those sorts of activities were absolutely captivating and rewarding, and just made my life shine for many, many years.
You must have been kind of like a kid in a candy shop.
It's hard for me not to use those words, but it's exactly true. And the organization, luckily enough, is getting ever more capable and developing an even broader reach when it comes to looking toward the future of the planet. So I'm really proud to have been in the earlier days of that evolution.
Well, we're going to take a short break and get back with John Francis in just a moment. But now we're going to do a giveaway of my book, which is called PR Works, and one of our famous Things to Do Today pads, which is for those of you who are OCD about getting things done, like me. I can always tell the kind of people that love those Things to Do Today pads, because they just can't wait to start checking things off, even if they have to write things down after they've done them, just in order to have the satisfaction of checking them off. So if you'd like to be today's winner, go to prmaven.com/giveaway. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, PR Maven Nation, Greg here from Marshall Communications. I want to talk about your marketing strategy. Some days, do you feel like you're a hamster running in a wheel? Perhaps you're running the same ad in the same publication because that's the way you've always done it. Or do you not know how many media impressions you got from that news story last month? Do you sometimes feel like you're doing a lot of work but not seeing the results? Well, the good news is you're not a hamster. And if you're feeling like your marketing plan could be better, we'd love to help. At Marshall Communications, we've worked with a wide range of businesses and organizations to create a customized marketing strategy known as the Marshall Plan. During a period of 3 months, we meet with you and your top stakeholders to learn about your world, what keeps you up at night, and best of all, the ways we can work together to combine your knowledge and our marketing and public relations experience to avoid the feeling of spinning in a wheel, and create a 3-year marketing plan that provides you with a vision for success. The Marshall Plan is a fully customized document using our 65 proprietary steps and leads to a playbook for your success. And trust me, it feels so much better than running around in a wheel. Now's a great time for you to grow your business, increase your profits, and most importantly, measure your results. If you think your business or organization would be a candidate for a Marshall Plan, you can take our Marshall Plan quiz to find out. Visit marshallpr.com/quiz. And if you'd like to schedule a free consultation about a Marshall Plan, visit marshallpr.com/consult or call us at 207-623-4177. Be sure to mention the code PODCAST for your free gift.
And welcome back. Today we're here with John Francis at the State of Maine Governor's Conference on Tourism. And John is the retired Vice President for Research, Conservation, and Exploration at National Geographic. I want to dive right back in with some more questions. John, in building your network, what hurdles did you personally face and how did you overcome them?
My network kind of came to me. So I was... the hurdles in just my day-to-day work were minimal. You have a big brand, you have people coming and want money from your grant programs, they deliver great goods, and then you can let them run throughout the whole National Geographic media empire if their story and product is interesting. So in some ways, it was done for me. In terms of, using social media and creating a following, in my role, I was more of a behind-the-scenes sort of guy. The people who knew the programs I ran were aware that I might be a good person to know and to follow, if you will. But it wasn't so much me and creating my network as much as enabling others to be seen. And in that case, for example, National Geographic, there was always the challenge of making sure you were out front on social, out front on a variety of different kinds of web-served media at a time when the organization, for example, was primarily a print magazine and a television channel. I was able to watch and help feed this beast that was transferring its energies toward these new opportunities for network building, if you will. And now the Instagram account at Geographic has reached phenomenal numbers. And that's partly because 120, 130 of the world's best photographers are feeding their lovely shots on a daily basis and providing a window to the world like few others can do. So, when you have that kind of carriage and the explorer community, then it's really not that difficult to get people to attend. Of course, you have to use the right devices, make sure it's out there, allow people to be a part of it. And there are a number of different programs that did that over the years that I worked at National Geographic. So that whole process is one you have to keep up with, right? And you have to have the best and brightest partners to help leverage some of the new opportunities. But in a larger corporation that's a leader in media, you can attract that kind of support as well. So I haven't suffered too much. Now that I'm independent, I still help at Geographic, but I'm a consultant and advisor and want to do good. It makes a little more sense for me to be out there individually. And that's something that I, along with many others, will face. And I'll see how much I do want to be active in that area because I still have a lot to say and do.
Well, I think there's so much that we could unpack there about how you have been part of this very highly esteemed brand, and it's an old brand, but it has had to morph, from just print and broadcast into social. But you talked about all these photographers who are contributing to the Instagram account and helping bring new life to the brand. And of course, now that you are retired and you're on the speakers circuit, like you are at the Governor's Conference on Tourism, you're building your personal brand as well. So there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm a little bit tentative when it comes to, egocentric type activity right now. You know, when you're in Washington, ego is prime, power is king. You're around people, and who you know and who you are as, you know, and your own brand becomes important carriage. Whereas at this time in my life, I feel like people need to be more outwardly focused and to think about themselves as a small part of that greater whole. So there's an internal dynamic going on here that has to do with promotion of self versus promotion of the issues that I care deeply about. And I can't tell you right now how I'm balancing that because it's still somewhat fresh to me. But I think it's something everybody has to consider when they're deciding on how to become visible.
Right, exactly. And of course, my premise is that the more established your personal brand is, the more respected you will be, and more people will listen to you and pay attention to you because they know that you're in alignment with your own values. So that's really the platform of this podcast.
Yeah, and that's excellent, and I commend you for it. And I maybe we can talk about how to strategically position myself given all these conflicts going forward.
You need a Marshall Plan.
Right.
Anyway, I was told not to laugh too loud because I don't want to break the lavalier mic. So, John, what would be your one piece of advice for someone starting their career?
It's kind of trite, but it still holds for me, and I mentor a lot of young people. And, you know, one of the things that I encourage is not to ignore your passions. You know, sometimes people look for, well, certainly you need to live and you need to have employment, but if you aren't doing what you love or getting as close as you can to it, you know, you're wasting your life basically, and you're probably diminishing your energy and your efficacy in the process. So then the question is always getting that clear, you know, what am I about, what really drives me, and then using that platform to decide what it is that you need in terms of tools, connections, experiences that will help you build toward that end. And that end may change. The guiding light on the horizon might shift a bit. Certainly the winds will shift. But you've got to let that be the driver rather than doing what's expedient. And that's, you know, that comes from a place of, you know, good fortune that I say that, and I don't want to be unrealistic, but man, if you aren't doing what you really love, then something is wrong.
I agree, absolutely. And I mean, you're a good example of that because you said you were intending to become a medical doctor, but then you became a PhD, and so now you're a doctor of nature.
Coelology. Yeah.
Coelology, is that real?
No, I'm joking. It was behavioral ecology, but
behavioral ecology.
I studied animal behavior and evolution of animal behavior. That was my specialty, but you know, it's wildlife biology. You know, you can call it a lot of things, but the one thing it certainly was passionate, fun, satisfying.
Right. Well, as in our pre-interview chat, I was telling you how I've recently discovered podcasting after being in public relations for 30 some odd years. And I feel like this has given me just a whole new breath of fresh air in my career, kind of in my final sprint towards the finish line. And I mean, it's podcasting for me is just fantastic because you get to choose to speak with interesting people like you who, I mean, otherwise you and I would not have had this in-depth conversation. We might have, shaken hands and said hello and exchanged business cards, but now I feel like I really know you and, we'll connect with you. And again, it's that face-to-face followed by the online connections that I think are so important. So is there a resource such as a book, a website, or an app that you have found helpful and why?
Oh, well, that's a huge question. What I'm finding more and more interesting in terms of, what I care about getting people out in nature is an application called iNaturalist. And this is a tool anybody can use if they, see something that and they don't know what it is, and they want to figure out, well, first of all, what is it, and then what does it do, or what can I know about it? You need a name, right? And not only that, but your photograph can become an observation that's useful around the world for scientists and conservationists alike. So the idea is, and this is a free download, you can take a picture of a plant or an insect or whatever. You push the button, what is it, basically. It'll give you about, 5 or 10 options by photo recognition software, really high-end software. And then you can say, yeah, that's what I think it is. And then the world of experts will look at it and confirm it or not. And if they confirm it, it becomes a scientific observation, part of a billion data point strong network called GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. But anyway, your photograph from iNaturalist can then become a time and date stamped and location stamped instance that then can say, hey, there's this new whatever in downtown Augusta, or this is an invasive that shouldn't be here and we've got to keep our eyes open. And not only that, but they'll tell you that this is such a cool thing, and if you want to know more, just click on this spot on iNaturalist, and it will tell you all about it. And my wife hates it because it slows down our hiking considerably, but actually she doesn't hate it because
she gets to take a rest.
Well, you can imagine. But I was held up by a couple of mushrooms recently, and it got to be too much for her. But regardless, you can do that afterwards. You can look up your mushroom or whatever when you get home, and you can be a scientist with just the click of a photo.
Well, I love that because before we started the podcast today, I was saying that we have sturgeon in the Kennebec River in downtown Augusta, and I will never forget the first time I saw those things jumping out of the river because they're so huge.
Right.
I mean, they're bigger than any fish I have ever seen, certainly in the Kennebec. And if I had been able to snap a photo and submit it, it would have been great.
Well, yeah. So you don't always have a naturalist with you to tell you what is that. So having it in an app is a wonderful thing, but just seeing the wonders of nature and beginning to look for it. So once you start attending to these things and you realize, well, I can learn, then you start looking for other things. The next thing you know, you're curious, and the next thing you know, you care, and the next thing you know, you're voting for that new park in an urban setting that can bring kids closer to nature.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, I know a lot of birders who are always fascinated with the birds, and we had a hawk in a park in Portland this winter that had lost its way and really didn't belong there. And unfortunately, it passed. We have a place called Avian Haven outside of Augusta that takes care of sick and disabled birds. And
yeah, and that happens, and when you're in nature and watch it enough, as I did with seals, seeing thousands in front of me every day, the things you can see in nature can be troubling but also beautiful, and there are both sides to that equation. Of course, everything dies, and we're kind of insulated from that in our lives, including the death of animals in nature. But the fact is that people do get a lot out of observing. eBird is the biggest citizen science app. iNaturalist is the second on the planet. And eBird, people can upload their observations of birds. And the next thing you know, you can map the whole migration of most of the species on the planet through citizen observations.
Yeah, that
sounds
great.
It is, the world is changing this way, and people can be involved like they never could before.
Well, we talked about lake living here in Maine, and Damascotta Lake, where I've spent most of the summers of my life. We have a lot of loons.
Oh,
how
lucky.
There's more loons there, I think, than any lake in Maine.
Yeah.
So I enjoy
beautiful bird,
hearing
beautiful
the
call,
yeah,
and
exactly.
It gets in your blood, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's so symbolic. It's a symbol for me of like just summertime at the lake, and I'm ready for that now.
Well, yeah, I was surprised to find the snow today, and but you have to have both, don't you, to appreciate the nice summers.
Right, yeah. So, do you have one parting thought you'd like to share with PR Maven Nation today, John?
I think the world is becoming an even richer place. Lots of people that have to think about their footprint, right? They can do things that are really positive and beautiful, or they can just not attend to the fact that they have a large impact, and as a result, in aggregate, the effect is going to be in the other direction. So I think the parting thought is that everybody can do a little bit, and they need to realize that they are incredibly powerful in numbers, and the individual act can have huge impact through ripples that you might not even imagine. So I'm encouraging people to be thoughtful actors as they make their march through this wonderful place, and hopefully here in Maine and elsewhere we'll have even stronger communities that get to celebrate what you guys enjoy every year.
Thank you. Yes, well, and again, by building your personal brand through online and in-person networking, then you can amplify your voice as well.
Thank you for your help there.
It's my pleasure. It comes naturally for me. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, what are some of the best ways?
I'm on Facebook pretty regularly, but my email address is my name, John Francis, at verizon.net.
Okay, and that's Francis.
Yeah, all one word.
At verizon.net. All right, well, thank you, John. This has been a real pleasure, and I wish it were nice outside. We could go out and try out those apps.
I can show you it when we have time.
Okay. Well, great. It was a real pleasure to have you here, and thank you for joining PR Maven Nation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the PR Maven podcast. For show notes, links, and guest contact information, visit prmaven.com. If you'd like to connect with Nancy and the rest of PR Maven Nation, be sure to find our group on Facebook. We encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and share our content to bring on great guests with more information. Plus, you can also connect with your target audience, build your network, and build your brand.